The third time I did it, I felt something come inside me. It felt like something seeped into my body.
Hello everybody. So we are currently with my friend Mr. Louie Ortega, and he has a powerful testimony that he's going to share with you guys today. He used to be deep in sin, a drug addict, into a lot of witchcraft and certain things like that, but I'm going to just let him do the explaining. But Mr. Louie, why don't you just introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name's Louis. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in New York, Long Island. Growing up, I grew up without a father. Grew up with 2 brothers, 1 sister. I was the youngest of all of them. While growing up, it was kind of difficult because I didn't really want to be like any of my brothers. I didn't really have a real role model growing up. And my mother was always working, so she showed me what hard work was. And I went to church when I was younger, but I didn't really know God. I was kind of dragged to church. So growing up, I was always trying to find a father figure, trying to find my way, because I felt something missing in my life my whole time. And as growing up, I started hanging out around with the wrong crowds around when I was like 13 years old, when I moved to Limburg. And when I moved there, I was just trying to fit in. I was trying to be the funny guy. And I ended up around 14 years old, started to smoke pot and just doing crazy stuff, stealing, hanging out, and just hanging out in the streets. But something in my heart always had something good in it, but there was something always missing. So growing up, I really wasn't really good at spelling and reading and all that stuff. But the one thing I always loved was food. So I was always looking to eat food. And I wanted to become a chef. So growing up, I was always, the one thing I wanted to do was to go to culinary school. So I went to culinary school, but I was about 17 years old. So I was a kid. I really was still getting wild, and I was more into partying than cooking. So when I was at culinary school, I was just partying and hanging out. I actually was doing really good until the last class, and I was partying so much that I actually got suspended from culinary school and got suspended for partying too much and suspended for failing a class. So I was pretty much down on the dumps when I left, because that was all I knew, that was all I wanted to do. And when I came back home, I was just kind of lost. So I went back to hang out with my friends, smoking pot all day long, chilling out, and just chilling out with the wrong crews. And I actually, about before I was going to go back to culinary school, I met this man, Mel Sim, and he introduced me to the Amway business. And I was about 18 at the time, and I was handed a lot of money, but I had nobody to teach me how to use it. So I was just a mess. I was a straight mess. And he was the first father figure in my life. And he actually reintroduced me to Christ then. And when he did, he was showing me how to be a man. It was the first man figure I had, and showed me principles and how to grow up. But I wasn't ready to switch my whole entire life to living that good life. So I saw glimpses of what a good life was. But I went back to doing what I was doing and left him. But I had all the principles. So while I was hanging out with my friends, I'm 20, 21 years old, I was hanging out getting all the drugs and everything. I knew all the connects. I was like, why don't I just sell the drugs? So I was working at the deli, and I started selling drugs. And I was just making a good amount of money. I was making more.
You were a drug dealing chef.
A drug dealing chef, exactly what I was. Drug dealing chef, working at the deli, always had dreams and ambitions to do something big. But as I was learning to cook, I realized that being in the kitchen wasn't something I wanted to do. Every time I went into the kitchen, I saw the chef inside there working 6 to 7 days a week, making a certain amount of money, and they were alcoholics, or they were doing drugs, or they weren't happy with their life, and someone else was raising their family, or they were cheating on their wives and stuff. So it wasn't what I wanted, so I went searching for something else. That's why the Amway business attracted me, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted. So then I was about 22 years old, selling drugs and everything, that I still didn't feel good, and I was overweight, so I got into fitness. So I became a big fitness fanatic. I lost 50 pounds in 5 months. And then I still was trying to figure out everything with fitness. So I went into that fitness journey / partying 2 times a weekend / eating and just doing whatever I wanted because I had the money, and I was making more money than people who went to college and stuff. So I was just a mess. But I finally got to the place where I was physically in shape how I liked, but I still was empty. There was something missing. So I had all the drugs, I had all the money. I was like, what's missing? So then I started with all the drugs I had. I was like the Fear in Las Vegas guy, that movie who he had the big drug stash. I started using the psychedelics I had to get deeper into spirituality. And I was doing a lot of research on Buddhism. I was doing research on tarot card reading, and started going to psychics, started getting my cards read, started looking at astrology, looking at, I'm a Libra, this and that. So I was just looking deep for answers. Why this, why that? And as I was going deeper and deeper, I started trying to find answers, but there was something inside me that I found that I was scared of. So while I was looking deeper and deeper, and I actually got connected with some shamans. And these shamans did these rituals, and there was a couple rituals I did. I did ayahuasca, I did bufo, I did combo, and bufo is this toad venom you smoke, and it's like DMT, and they call it DMOT5, and you smoke it. It's supposed to break the fear of death, and it's like a 15-minute trip, and you would smoke it and have this hallucination trip, and you would like out of body experience.
So what led you to start beginning that journey? How did you find out about things like that?
I connected with one of my friends, and he had a boss who had connections where they would do those psychedelic experiences. And I was looking online for different things because I was doing acid, I was doing mushrooms, I was using Molly, I was using weed, and I was like meditating and looking at all these practices online to see how I could get deeper. And I heard about ayahuasca, and I heard about these spiritual trips you would do, and I was looking to see how I could do it. Either I could go to another country to do it or find it here. And I was even messing with ketamine, and I was seeing how to use them, and I felt like I was gaining this wisdom, but like there was still something missing, so I wanted to go deeper. So once I connected, I pressured my friend to get the connection, and we finally got the connection and the number of the shamans. So the other one was called ayahuasca, and it's these two practices are they're new age practices that are known, that is becoming very regulated to people, but it's pretty hard to find. A lot of people haven't done this yet.
So how'd they advertise it to you in a way that made you really want to do it?
So they advertised, the first two they advertised with combo first. And combo was this healing it was a toad venom that you would put on your body, and it would clean you out and heal your body from any sicknesses and different things. And what it would do is you would fast before going into that ceremony, and you would just drink water, and they would do a 3-part session in that. They would do something called sananga, and they would put these eye drops in your eyes to clean your eye gates out. Then you would drink like almost like 2 liters of water, and then they would take a little stick, it was like a tribal stick, and they would burn it to put 4 burns on your skin to put scabs on you, and then they would take the venom and put it over the burns, and then the venom would seep into you, and your body temperature would raise because you'd almost be like fighting an infection, and all the water inside you would almost like boil up, and you would start vomiting and extra coming out the other hole, all the water secretion, and you would be on fire, and almost every purity out of you comes out of you. And then afterwards you would sit there, and then they would give you something called hape, and you would take this tobacco and they would shoot it up your nose and bring you into this meditative state. And they suggested that one first, but I did the bufo first. And the bufo is the toad venom that you would smoke, and it's from this toad, and it's a whole visual trip. And my friends who I did it with, the two of them did the combo, and I did the bufo. And when I did the bufo, when I first smoked it, it was pretty wild. What you do is you read this pact almost, and it sounded really nice. And it was just like to get you in the mindset. They're playing music in the background and everything. And when you do this, you would get ready and prepared to smoke this. And what you would do is you would hit it and hold it in till you can't breathe anymore, and keep hitting it till you knocked out. And then the second you would knock out, you would have this crazy experience.
So tell us a little bit about your experience with these.
So the bufo. So the first time I did bufo 4 times, and the first time I did it, I went to do it, and I was so broken from heartbreak of a relation, and just like I had all this brokenness inside. So I really wanted to battle what was inside my mind that was scary, and I wanted to face it all so I wouldn't have no fear. When I was smoking it the first time, I was like...
So it was almost like you were seeking deliverance.
Exactly. I was seeking deliverance. I was seeking something to help me because everything else in the world wasn't. And when I did it, I smoked it, and it was like I was fighting a battle. And I was just being... It was funny because when you bring it back to knowing now, it was just like I was being physically strong. And by 2 minutes in, I just started crying. I started crying for 5 minutes straight. And it was just like everything that was hurt inside me was able to release. And then right after that, it was just like everything then I was just in a calm, peaceful mindset. And it was like I was inside my mind, and I was walking inside a cave, and I was just seeing all the baggage of everything that was in my life walking by. And I was laughing because I was like, this is what I was scared of. And I was just walking through it. And then when I came back to be, and like they're chanting, they're like shaking musical instruments while I'm doing it. And when I come back, it's like I came back as a new person. It was like I was liberated from all that hurt, all that fear, all that everything. And it was just like I felt this just peace over me. And it felt like I had another thing inside me telling me and helping me through my mindset now.
So I just want to pause right there, and for the viewers, just let you guys know that is witchcraft, and it is the devil using spiritual things to try and get people deliverance, try and get people things that they can only truly get the fullness of from Jesus. And we know that the Bible says when a demon leaves a person, it goes out seeking 7 more wicked spirits to come back to a house that's clean and swept and in order, and then the person at the end of it will be worse than they were at the beginning. So you can go ahead and continue.
Yeah, so my friend saw what happened, and I was like gaining this power, and it was just like this wisdom. It was like I thought I was smarter than everyone. I thought I had this thing that everybody else didn't have. And
Thought you were woke.
Yeah, I thought I was woke. Exactly. I thought I was woke. And I'm just like, but it was just funny because it was like later on that I figured God was just using it for what it was. And I was going through everything. I was learning to forgive people. I was going through and letting go of things, and I was moving forward. But it only like lasted a month. After the month happened, after it was done, it was like that. It was like I was on the high, but I needed more. It was like I needed more. I wanted to go deeper. It was like I broke through the first shell of what was inside me, so I want to go deeper. I did the combo, and that was interesting. And when I did the combo, my 2 other friends did the bufo. And the combo, as I explained, was that toad poison cleared me out. It felt like I brought like 2 or 3 years back in my life. It was like I cleaned out my body, but it was just like I didn't know what I was trading for that. So I felt like I was cleaned out. And I was ready to go do the bufo again. And my friends did both, and they received somewhat of power like they did. They had a different breakthrough like I did. So I went to go do it again. And now the second time I did it, I felt it was a totally different entire journey. It felt like just a peaceful journey. Like my body was moving crazy during it. Like little did I know what it was later. I was just peace. And like now, it was like I was ready to come up with all these business plans I was doing. And I was ready. And I was just like there. And I was coming up with business plans, coming up with things. But everything still wasn't working. It was like I finally was conquering that peace that I needed. But it was like I needed another hit. I needed another hit. I needed another hit. I needed more. And it was just like each time I went deeper, I learned something new or I gained something new. So my friends did it. So now, the third time I did it, my friend who did it with us, one of them, the second time he did it, he thought he was God. And I was like, all right, that's kind of weird. And then the other friend who did it got stuck in hell. And he had a traumatic experience. And that experience led him to Christ. And I was like, and he was speaking to me. He's like, yo, don't do it. It's demonic. And I'm saying to him, you just had a bad trip. And like, I know God. God is good, thinking I know who God is.
Did he go any deeper into what happened to him exactly? Or did he just tell you that he had that experience?
Well, what happened to him was he had that experience and he had the fear of God on him. He told me exactly what happened. He went to go bring his friend to go do the ceremony. And when he went to go bring his friend to the ceremony, for her to get it, he got trapped inside the place. And the people who were doing there were saying, all is perfect, all is perfect. And he knew inside himself, nothing was perfect. And he was just stuck in this place and he was screaming so loud like a death because he knew he was stuck in a place and he knew that he wasn't getting out. And he had that fear of that place. And his friend of his was a Christian believer, and he had a book that he had a book of Christ, like a little pamphlet, and he was in his house, fear of death inside him, and things were telling him to go kill himself and everything. And he started reading the pamphlet, and he just felt peace and everything, and he was feeling the peace and everything, and he heard the voice of God right there. And basically he said that when he heard the voice of God, it told him, don't worry, I'm here, this and that. And God was speaking to him. And long story but short, because I don't know all the details, I know God told him to go take a shower. And he had deliverance in the shower of everything. And he was spinning around, and God was just spinning him around, delivering him inside the shower. And he was fully cleaned out. And he started walking and having his friend teaching the word of God. And then he started speaking to me about it. But I was still like, this had power. So then I went to go do the third time. He was telling me this is demonic, whatever. I'm like, nah, whatever. I'm like, this and that. The third time I did it, I felt something come inside me. I was smoking it, I did it, and I was shaking during it. And it was different than the first two times. And it felt like something seeped into my body. And it was very sexual. And it was just like this other thing in here. And I was like, once I got out of that, I was like spooked. And I was like, okay. And in the midst of all of doing these trips, I was still using my drugs at the house. So I was using what I learned from the trips. And then I was using like weed and ketamine to re-simulate those trips. So what I would do is I would go home, and certain times I would put music on and try to meditate with the drugs to seep into it, because of those trips, I opened up a portal inside of myself and I was almost able to enter into those realms. But each time I entered into those realms, it was like, there was like fear, but it was just like, there was just a newness I was finding in there. So I didn't know that I was reconnecting in a bad way, but anyways, I did it the third time. I was scared, and then I was introduced to the ayahuasca. And the ayahuasca is like the bufo, but they talk about it, the mother of nature that you could meet during that trip. So I went to go do that ceremony with about...
Wow. That's interesting, because I actually had a friend who, before I came to Christ, he was telling our friends how he went to, I think it was Brazil, it was somewhere, to do the ayahuasca trip, and with a tribe down there. And he did the trip, and they literally had them like going through the forest, and he ran into this lady, and she was literally calling animals, and a whole bunch of animals was just coming to her house, and she was just calling animals, and they would just listen to her and come to her house. And it was like it was a very spiritual thing, but it was witchcraft. And yeah, it's very interesting. You said that mother of nature thing.
Yeah, that's what they call it. They say that you can meet her. So I was like, you know what? I did Bufo, and I'm like, Bufo is even stronger than the ayahuasca, because when you compare to it, you would compare that the Bufo went straight at you, and the ayahuasca was like you had to like seep in there. So when I went to go do the ceremony, Bufo's more interactive, like one-on-one. The ayahuasca is like you do in a group setting. So I did it in the city with about almost like 15 other people. And these people came from an indigenous tribe, and they make this stuff. So it's made out of tree, this whole process. And you would drink this cup, and they would play music and everything. And I drank the cup, and I was laughing because, like, I didn't feel nothing. I'm seeing all these people trip out. I'm like, yo, I need another cup. I'm like, I don't know what's up with you guys. And I drank another cup. I'm seeing everybody trip. I didn't really feel much. And I felt something near the end because I was trying so hard to have an encounter. But the encounters with the Bufo were so much more intense than the ayahuasca that the ayahuasca was like nothing to me. And it was probably because I was probably doing so many drugs before that night, trying to get deep in meditation. So that experience was interesting, but I saw people like, it was crazy. It's as crazy as the Bufo, but it's just different. So then my friend continuously talking to me about the demonic stuff with the Bufo. And I was like, I'm going to do it this time. But this time I told him I'm going to ask God to show me if this is bad. And the second I did the ceremony this time, I felt something.
So before the ceremony,
yeah,
you asked God.
I said, God, if this is bad, show me.
Okay, all right.
And when I went to the ceremony, I felt that thing that was inside of me halfway come out of me. And I like threw, it was like I threw it up almost. And it felt like 15 pounds was lifted off my back. But then I felt like something had control of my front part of my body, half of my face, and like part of my ear popped open. Like I was able to hear out of my right ear, but my left ear was clogged. And after the ceremony, I was trying to use because it would make you do these vibration calls and different things. Like your body would move uncontrollably. And that time, my body, it was like this time was crazy. This time I smoked it and I popped out of my body and came back into my body. And it was just nuts. And I was like, whoa. It was like I was an atom and then came back in. And then it was just like everything was coming out of me. And I shook everything out. And it was like I was able to secrete these crazy noises out of my mouth. And it was absolutely nuts. And by the end of it, I just felt like halfway free, but not all the way. And I was trying to get it out on my own with the ceremony. I couldn't get it out. And I was kind of spooked because I was like, oh man, that thing inside me was really inside me. I'm like, I went to go have dinner with my friends, and my friend was there that was talking to me that was demonic. So he was reading the Bible inside the car. He was reading the Message version, and he started reading verses out of there. I don't remember exactly what verses, but I was listening, and it was funny because I wasn't even listening with the ear that was clogged. I was listening with the ear that finally opened, and I'm listening to him like this, and I'm like, it says that in the Bible? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, and I'm just like, because I knew the Bible, but it's just like everybody else in this world. They say they know the word. Oh, I went to church, but they never read the word. They never read the Bible. They go off of other people's notions, their ideas, but they never read it themselves. Or they may have read it, but they haven't read it with someone teaching them the word or being their mentor and understanding how the word goes. So he talked to me that night, and I was talking to him directly in the car, and he's like, why don't you go home tonight and ask Jesus Christ if he's real, to reveal himself to you? And I said, I talk to God all the time. And he's like, yo, God can be money. God can be women. God can be your job. God can be you. God can be anything. Anything can be God. People worship different gods, you know? Jesus Christ is Jesus Christ. And I said, okay, why not? I had this deep gut feeling inside myself because I had so many experiences with God and religion. And I tried different religions. Like I tried Buddhism. I tried I looked at all the different religions and I thought for me, my thought process was there's a God, but like all these religions have something. All these things have something in them. And they all have all these pieces of hearing like you're your own God, or like the law of attraction, all that stuff, and like astrology. I was like, all of them combined or something, you know? But I didn't really understand it until I had my experience. So I had a feeling when I went home tonight and made that prayer, I knew something was going to change. And I was walking around my house, I was scared, and I was like, all right, I'm like, Jesus, I went on my knees, I'm like, Jesus Christ, reveal yourself to me. I had my eyes closed, I opened up one eye, I'm like, all right, I guess not. I'm like, whatever. So the next day I go by, do my normal thing, selling my drugs. I'm like getting ready for the weekend because I'm going to go party. So I want to go get a massage. So I was so excited for this massage. So excited. And before I went to the massage parlor, I would normally do my normal setup. Like I would smoke a little bit of weed so my body would be really relaxed. And I would do like a drop of ketamine, because the ketamine, I was using ketamine to like numb my body a little bit so they could go deeper in the massage. But I used very little. Like there's things called, when you would do ketamine, called K-holes, and you would get like messed up. So I did very little. And the second I got on the massage table, I went on the massage table and my body started shaking on top of the massage table. And I was like, what is going on here? It was just like I was reliving the what's it called? The experience of the combo and the Bufo. And I had my eyes closed and I'm like, what is going on? And I had this vision. And I'm sitting in the vision and it's like I'm in front of an altar at a church. And my arms like this back. And I'm just like with my head straight forward, and I'm like throwing up, and I'm actually spitting up stuff throughout the table. And I just felt everything that was during that ceremony that I did last time that didn't come out of me was coming out of me right there. And I just felt everything coming out of me. And I'm sitting there in my head like, isn't the masseuse right here? And it felt like the masseuse was a totally different person I'd ever seen. I'd never seen that masseuse ever again in my life. But the masseuse was just standing there, just letting all of that happen. It was kind of crazy. Started throwing up, and then I'm sitting there and I just finally felt, this was the first time I felt all the darkness out of my body that I felt since the beginning of my life. And I said, God? And I felt a hand on my back, just a piece. I just felt it, almost like the piece of the hand just vibrated throughout my body. And it was just like I was in front of that altar and he was just putting his power inside of me. And it was just like, I just started crying like a baby. And I just realized, wow, I'm not invincible. Wow, I am not a God. Wow, I'm just, everything that I've been through, I've been spitting in God's face this whole time. I've been trying to find out who God was. I was trying to find out what this is or that is and this is and that. And all I had to do was call on his name. And it was like I had all these experiences with God, but nobody taught me. But now this was like a real experience I had with God that I could be like, whoa, who is this guy? I need to find out who this guy is. I literally get out of the massage parlor and I'm with my friend Marcelo, and I'm sitting there crying and he's just looking at me like I'm nuts. I'm like, yo, I gotta drop you off. And he's like, it's okay, man. I'm like, dude, he has no idea what just happened. And I'm like, dude, I'll talk to you later. I call my friend and I call him. And when I call him, he goes, I'm like crying to him. I'm like, yo, I just had to experience this and that. He's like, when did you have that experience? He's like, I'm like, I just had it an hour ago. He's like, you gotta be kidding me. He's like, yo, we were all at the church praying for you. Everybody at the church was praying for you while that experience was going on. Wow. I went over to him. I went and I was crying in the car to him. And I was just like, man, I need to learn who God is, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm ready. And it was like, now it was the beginning of the journey of walking with Christ. And it was like, some people have full deliverance. It was just like I had a supernatural experience. Like God came to me where I was. So this was just the beginning of the battle, because I didn't realize all the stuff was inside me. And when I came out of that massage parlor, I had these glasses on my eyes, and it was like God took them off, so now I was able to see everything for what it was. And I tried to go through my life. I tried to smoke weed and stuff. It was totally different. And when I closed my eyes every time, I felt I had this tunnel, this green tunnel that I could almost like jump into, and it freaked me out. I'm like, I can't smoke. I'm like, so it was just like I was stopping to try to do all the drugs and everything. And the first time I went to church, and it was funny, I went to a Spanish church. I'm Cuban, but I can't even speak Spanish that well. And I met Daryl, and Daryl changed my life. It was like I found someone that I could relate to. And I probably would have never went to that church, but God's plan is always perfect. So I started learning about the Bible. I started trying to move forward and learn about the Word. And it was hard. It was the hardest thing because everything I knew was different. It was like I was living in one world and now I'm learning another world, but cleaning myself out of everything. So it was just such a battle. And the more that I started trying to take myself out of the world I was in, I was getting attacked every single night. Every single night I was getting tormented when I was going to sleep. I was getting tormented everywhere. And people were looking at me like I was crazy. They're like, oh, you know, but they don't know what I went through. I'm like, and I'm just going to church and I'm feeling these experiences at church, like my body vibrating and everything, but it was still like hard. And I was reading the Word and trying to understand the Word, and I was finally, it must have been about month 1, where I had the second craziest experience of my life with God. I was at church and I felt uncomfortable putting my hands up, and I was finally getting rid of all the drugs, so I smoked a little bit of weed that night. And I normally used to smoke a lot of weed. I used to smoke 10 or 12 times a day. It was just a natural, normal thing for me. And when I was doing that, I went to, instead of like, and I was using these new age practices. I was using like Wim Hof breathing. I was using yoga. I was using meditation, but I was meditating to myself, not to God. So meditation's good, but how people use meditation is different. So when I was doing it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do stretching, and I'm going to do it with worship music this time. So I put the worship music on, and I started doing like some stretching, and all I hear on the Spotify, and I'm listening to worship live, and all I hear is, I see everything you're doing. I see that you love me, and I love you. And I'm like, what worship station is this? And I'm just like laughing. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I see everything they're doing. I see that you're trying. I love you. I'm like, what? I'm looking at the iPod. I'm like, I'm seeing whatever live. I'm like, this is crazy. He's like, have no fear. I love you. I'm like, what? I take my AirPods out. I'm like, I'm tripping, dude. I'm like, I put them back on. He's like, didn't I just tell you not to have no fear? And then says a Bible verse to me. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? He's like, I want you to sing to me and dance to me. I'm like, what? I'm looking around my room. I'm like, I didn't even smoke that much weed. I'm like looking around. I saw a light there. I'm like, someone's watching me. I'm tripping. I'm like, you know what? I'm switching the station. I'm like, everything's live. This station's not gonna have everything live. Someone's watching me. And then again, didn't I just tell you not to have no fear? Proverbs, this and that. And I'm like, okay. I didn't really know the Bible fully, so I knew he said Bible verses, but I didn't know any Bible verses. I'm like, all right, you got my attention. What do you want me to do? And he's having me sing inside my house with my hands up, and I'm dancing around my house at 10:30 at night, and somehow nobody's home. But that was the first time I experienced the love of God. And it just felt the touching of the warmness and everything. It was just like everything I was trying to battle to get closer to him, I felt it. And it was like, wow. I'm like, even in my head, it was saying like, man, I'm doing all this, but I'm getting nothing. All I'm doing is losing everything I had. But I realized I was gaining the love of God. And I didn't realize that God was right there walking with me every single time. But I was trying to get closer to him, but he saw it and he showed it to me that I was getting closer. I ended up bugging out and putting the AirPods back on after. And he goes like, I want you to tell everybody about this experience that happened. And that was now I knew what God's love was, so there was nothing turning me back. So I was like full in. So I started reading the Bible every day, but I was still having trouble. It was like I would hear God sometimes and then I wouldn't. And one day I went over, it was like month 2.5. I finally stopped smoking weed, but I still was like, had other things. And I came over to the house and they were talking about how I would talk to people and sell drugs to people. And I would almost like be their therapist to a sense. It was pretty oxymoron.
So were you selling drugs still at that time?
I was still selling drugs.
Oh.
I was still selling weed.
Yeah.
I had all the other drugs, but I wasn't using them. So it was like that was my cash cow. Like I was trying to move closer and get out, but it was like, how am I gonna transfer that money from weed to real money? Because I was making almost like $7,000 a month. I was like, I can't just throw this away. And I went over to the house and they said, hey, my friend was telling me about how he threw away his drugs and everything. And I'm like, bro, you threw away, what, $500 worth of drugs? I'm like, I got like $6,000, $7,000 worth of drugs. I'm like, that ain't the same. But then the person at the Bible study said something to me. They said, how can you give someone good advice if you're still doing what you're doing? And I was like, wow, she's right. I went home that night and that was a battle, man. I must have flushed 22 E-bombs. I flushed about 28 tabs of acid, an ounce of cocaine, 7 grams of ketamine, an ounce of mushrooms, and some other stuff. But I didn't get rid of the weed because that was my cash crop. So, man, that was an expensive toilet flush. So I flushed almost like $6,000 worth of drugs down the toilet. Something like that. So I finally flushed the drugs, so I got rid of all the psychedelic drugs, and I was just going deeper. So now it was about the next month I was in a Bible study, and I'm sitting there just freaking out, and I'm just getting deeper and deeper, and I'm just getting closer with God, and it's just hard still. And I'm like, we're in the Bible study, and they go like, hey, they're like, is there anything anybody wants to get rid of or like stop doing? And I screamed out, I'm like, I want to stop selling drugs. And I just started tweaking out there. I started flinching. I started getting anxiety. I started getting stressed. I started getting attacked in my mind. I'm like, how are you going to change your money? How are you going to do this? What are you going to do if that stops? And I'm just freaking out inside my mind. And it was like the hardest thing to release out of my mouth. And I started freaking out. And I had Kevin, my friend Kevin, come up to me. He's like, hey, can I pray for you? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? He's like, yeah. So he starts praying, and I black out. I come back to it 10 minutes later, and I got like 10 people over me, out of him. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, all right, read this. And I'm like renouncing all these different things, and I'm like going back to like all the bonds I had with these women, all the bonds I had with this, all the people I had to forgive, and I was receiving deliverance as I didn't know now. I was receiving deliverance without even knowing. And I'm just throwing up in this bag, everything. And it was just like a 2-hour process. And by the end of it, I went home that night and I realized my mind was clear. And I was like, no way. I was like, this whole time I was being deceived. This whole time I had all these demons inside my mind speaking to me. And I was angry because I was like, if I'm tormented, I can only imagine all the people I know who are tormented. So that I just went deeper, and I was just trying to find the answers and get deeper. And then at that time I did a 3-day fast, and I did that 3-day fast, and that was the time that I was like in day 2, and I was just fighting the food. And my friend said, sit down and talk to God. And God was talking directly to me, and I was actually like hearing his voice clear now. And he's like, what do you think about Sweet Lou? And it was my Instagram name. And I go like, he's like, this is the name you want to be remembered as? Where did you get that name from? I'm like, from a movie? And he's like, yeah, who is that guy in the movie? Why did they call him Sweet Lou? And I was like, well, he was like a guy who'd pick up younger girls and everything. He's like, that's who you want to be known as? And then I was like, dang, I got to change my Instagram name. And then he was like, what about that word, that's it? And I'm like, that. He's like, where'd you get that from? And I realized I got this from an Instagram person who would be like, I'm a classy whatever from Westchester. I was like, oh man, this is not good.
So then when did you get rid of the weed? When did that finish?
It was about right after that deliverance. I sold the last bit of weed, and I gave my whole drug route. And I had a drug route. I had a whole route. I gave it away to a friend, and at that moment, it was scary because that was how I was making my money, and I just started stock trading, and then I asked the Lord, and I started doing stock trading. And I'm like, Lord, God, if you are the one who's going to create money for me, show me. So I was in the stock market doing a trade, and this was in the beginning, and I said, God, if this is you and you're going to do it, you show me. So I put all my money that I had on one stock, and I left it alone, and I deleted the app for a week. I went back on the app that week, and I was up $25,000. I was like, what? And I was like panicking, and I'm like, sell. And God goes like, that's baby faith. I'm like, what? The next day I found out if I left that stock alone 2 days, I would have been up $100,000. Wow. And I was like, wow. And I realized that money was my God, and different things were my God. But I realized that God had control over it. If I needed money, He would show me how to do it. But I had to learn to listen to Him.
So what does God have you doing now?
Well, now it was about in my 8th month. I would say 9th month of December 7th. I met Apostle Paul and his students, and I spoke to him. And he was traveling around the world right now, sharing the word and doing these outreaches and connecting with people. And when I saw what he was doing and I heard his principles and heard what I needed, I felt the touch of God tell me I need to go follow this guy and learn from him. And I asked my pastor, Darryl, I'm like, what do you think? He said, go for it. And it's been about 2 months. I've been following this man, Apostle Paul, all over these states. I went to Honduras about 3 weeks ago, and it's been the craziest journey of my life. But it's funny, man, when you tell God to use you, be ready to be used. I can tell you that much.
Thank you so much for coming on Out of This World and sharing your testimony. I believe that God is going to touch many people and open up their eyes through this testimony that you've shared. God bless you, and thank you all viewers for coming and listening.